Chapter 19. The Library and the Candle. From the Tallow Verses of Seraphine the Listener, composed in the wake of first flame. Not all fire begins with kindling. Some is carried, unseen, until it speaks in sparks. One sought the truth behind steel, but another touched the breath beneath the forge. The candle bowed before command, but the flame was older than the voice that named it, and in smoke, something ancient stirred, remembering a promise not yet made. Dawn's mist clung low to the Estenvale lawns, its tendrils curling like whispers over trimmed hedgerows and damp cobbles. The scent of wet soil and chimney smoke hung in the air, stirred gently by the rustling of spring leaves and the soft tread of servants crossing the gravel paths. Lanterns dimmed in their sconces, yielding to morning light. Above it all, the manor watched like a memory. From the eastern courtyard, the sharp ring of steel echoed, clean, precise. Kael and Thorn sparred, their movements growing faster, more fluid. Their swords rang like tuned chimes, strike, parry, breath. The rhythm rose and fell, more like a duet than a duel. Kael moved with a farmer's restraint, Thorn with a poet's flair. Garrick never blinked. Garrick circled them slowly, arms crossed, his eyes hawk-sharp. Kael's strikes were measured, defensive. Thorn's blade moved like a river, quick, flowing, unpredictable. Both were shirt-sleeved and sweat-slick, breath clouding in the cool air. Near the garden gate, Fergus stood watching, arms folded across his chest, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. They can keep their swords. I'd rather invent something that scares them into truce. Fergus's tone was light, but his eyes lingered. Part of him wondered what it would feel like, to trust motion instead of math. A voice answered from behind, low and knowing. "You envy their dance." Fergus turned. Ashen stood beneath the arch of the library's grand door, a silhouette in layered robes of midnight and ash, hands folded at the small of his back. His eyes gleamed with curiosity, sharp, reflective, ancient. I respect it, balance, coordination, instinct, but I'm not the blade, I'm the blueprint. Ashenvale's lips twitched in amusement. He studied Fergus the way a cartographer might study the edge of an unfinished map. Then he turned toward the door without waiting. Spoken like one yet to feel a cut, he turned, beckoning. "Come, today you meet the other kind of steel." Inside the library, the door shut behind them with a soft thud, sealing Fergus into a chamber of quiet gravity. The smell of parchment and beeswax filled his lungs. Sunlight filtered through tall, stained glass windows, laying mosaics of color across tiled stone. The air held warmth and quiet pressure, as if every book held breath. Fergus felt it against his skin, like entering a storm that hadn't broken yet. Something here watched, or maybe waited. Shelves stretched floor to ceiling, scrolls, atlases, treatises. Some were strapped shut with iron, others whispered softly as they shifted, their vellum skin rustling like dry leaves. Fergus blinked. Cinderfeld's library could fit in a wardrobe here. Ashenvale strode toward a reading table layered with scrolls, tools, and crystalline vials. No jests about these shelves. You'll find more than dusty formulas. Distillation, alloys, pressure laws, ancient scripts, forbidden glyphs, books that bleed ink if opened wrong. Fergus lit up at the mention of pressure flows and heat maps. His fingers traced the grain of the long table, its surface etched with arcane circles and geometric diagrams. Fergus murmured, already swept up in ideas. "Do we have blacksmiths?" Ashenvale nodded without hesitation. 3 on retainer. The manor sponsors a 4th in the lower city. There's a glassblower as well. Young, temperamental, but skilled. You'll have the tools you need. Fergus smiled faintly, mind already racing. Steel retorts, coil stills, Pressure valves, copper piping. Fire Brew 3.0 could be real. Ashenvale's brow arched. You still see magic as fluff. Fergus folded his arms, standing his ground. Magic's spectacle. I build things you can touch. Ashenvale turned to a tall candelabra, its 5 wicks unlit. He raised a hand. Valien Soltaire. Fire flared, clean, silent, white gold. Each wick ignited in sequence, as if responding to a symphony only Ashenvale could hear. The light didn't flicker. It listened. Fergus's breath caught, not from fear, but the terrifying thrill of understanding something without knowing why. Fergus stared. Show off. Ashenvale's smile was faint. Try it. Fergus hesitated, then raised his hand just slightly. His fingers shook, not with doubt, but anticipation. Deep down, he wanted it to work. Fergus hesitated. You want me to say magic words at a stick? Ashenvale gestured calmly. It's not asking, it's commanding. Intent matters. Fergus faced the sconce reluctantly, muttering with doubt. If I singe my brows, Kael's gonna laugh for weeks. He cleared his throat. Valien Soltaire. Nothing. Ashenvale offered calmly, with an air of patient instruction. Again, mean it. Not with your mouth, your will. Fergus drew in a breath. He imagined pressure flowing through copper coils, heat rising, the precise instant when vapor becomes flame. He whispered, firmer. Valien Soltaire. The candle flickered. A flame sparked and held, small, unsure, but alive. He smiled, barely, but then his vision blurred at the edges. The flame didn't just respond, it recognized him. Fergus blinked, heart hammering. I did that. But then a lurch. Heat surged through his arm, sharp and liquid. A sudden wave of energy erupted from his hands, cracking like a split cask under pressure. Fergus staggered back. It felt like his bones had been filled with boiling water, like pressure wanted out of his skin. His mouth opened, but no words came, just heat and light. Fire burst out in twin arcs, licking the sconce, then the nearby tapestry. Fergus shouted, panic rising as fire surged through him. I can't stop it! His fingers trembled, and wild heat poured from him, uncontrolled. Flames danced along the table's edge. Scrolls rolled away like frightened animals. The air thickened with smoke. The scent was sharp, scorched vellum, singed linen, the faint sweetness of burning ink. Scrolls curled like leaves in flame. A tapestry's edge crumbled into ash. Ashenvale didn't flinch. He watched, measured, not panicked, but assessing, like a smith gauging a forge before working the steel. Ashenvale raised a steady hand and invoked the words. Veranor Eshtil. The flames collapsed inward, like breath recalled. Smoke coiled once more into silence. Outside in the courtyard, Kael lowered his blade, sweat rolling down his temple. He sniffed the air. Kael lowered his blade, sniffing the air suspiciously. Smoke? Thorns straightened, sword still raised. Please tell me Fergus didn't burn the bloody archives. A shout from a footman echoed. Fire in the west wing! Inside, Fergus sat slumped on a stone bench near the scorched tapestry, fingers curled against his palms. The heat still coiled under his skin like a second pulse. He couldn't tell if he was cold or overheated. His limbs ached like he'd sprinted uphill. His breath came short and fast, like the fire had taken more than just air. Ashenvale crouched before him, eyes sharp, but not unkind. You lit the spark. That much is clear. Fergus's voice was hollow, filled with shame and awe. I just wanted a candle, not a bloody bonfire. Ashenvale studied the scorched floor, then smiled dryly. Enthusiasm, That's the word for it. He stood and retrieved a thick tome, its cover banded in copper. You'll read this before breakfast, and again after lunch. Fergus raised a brow, trying to regain some levity. More spells? Ashen Vale replied. Restraint, grounding, control. Magic doesn't just light candles, it listens. Ashen Vale met Fergus's eyes, and it waits. You gave it too much, too fast, but it's not a curse, it's a question. And you answered, and it remembers. Fergus looked down at his blackened hands, the skin unburned but tingling. Fergus murmured softly, staring at his tingling hands. What happens if I can't control it? Ashen Vale placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we make sure you never reach that point, together. His hand stayed on Fergus's shoulder, steady as stone. Control doesn't come first, understanding does. He turned toward the candelabra, now flickering steadily again. Ashen Vale murmured as he turned toward the flickering light. You've been carrying the current all along, Fergus. It was never about lighting the flame. It was about not drowning in it. The scent of scorched vellum still lingered as Kael and Thorn stepped out into the corridor, just beyond the library's blackened arch. Servants moved quickly now, dousing soot and checking beams for heat. Kael and Thorn stood just beyond the library's door, watching servants scurry to mop soot and check for further damage. Thorn grimaced as he watched the smoke drifting from the wing. Can we leave him unsupervised for 5 minutes? Kael replied with a faint smile. He lived. That's a win. Kael's smile faded slowly. The scent of smoke always lingered too long. First sparks left scars, even if you didn't see them. Inside, the glow of firelight still shimmered against the tall bookshelves, but the danger had passed, for now. Fergus, now seated before a new candle, stared at the tiny wick as if it might jump. Fergus muttered under his breath as he faced a new candle. No sparks this time, just science. He adjusted the wick with surgical care. No jokes, no muttering, just breathing. Each inhale a promise not to lose control again. The flame flickered peacefully, and he let out a slow, steady breath. The flame held. So did he.